Hello and welcome. We begin with Nigeria. As the US mulls expanding its travel ban to 36 more countries, Nigeria has issued a stark warning. The nation says the US could face retaliatory action and risk losing access to strategic minerals in West Africa. Now, the warning comes amid reports that the Trump administration is planning to significantly expand its controversial travel ban. Earlier this month, President Donald Trump imposed full and partial restrictions on foreign nationals.
Nigeria is drawing a line in the sand. The nation's mineral wealth, lithium, tantalum, iron, and more, could vanish from global markets if the United States imposes a ban. Imagine electric cars slowing down, smartphones delayed, high-tech industries scrambling. For decades, Nigerian minerals fueled global powerhouses. Now, the game has changed. Sovereignty, leverage, power. Nigeria isn't just protecting its resources, it's rewriting the rules of global trade. What happens next could shake the world.
In the dusty plains of northern Nigeria, under a blazing equatorial sun, strategic decisions are being forged, decisions that could shake the global supply chains of vital minerals and redraw the balance of economic power. This is not the tale of a lone rebel or one insurgent company. It is the story of a nation rising, of Nigerian soil reclaiming its value, of a government daring to assert its sovereignty. And towering over it all is a stark warning. If the United States dares to impose a ban, the reward is losing access to minerals that drive modern industry, innovation, and military might. The trembling tension began when whispers in Abuja grew into thunderous rumblings in Lagos boardrooms. The government of Nigeria, for years quietly surveying its immense geological wealth, had decided enough was enough. Behind the skyscrapers and bustling markets, behind the drums of commerce and politics, there lay vast reserves of iron ore, columbite, tantalite, tin, copper, and potentially crucially, rare earth elements and lithium, minerals essential to everything from electric vehicle batteries to smartphones, from jet engines to renewable energy turbines. For decades, global mineral companies had flitted across Nigeria's terrains, exploring, extracting, exporting. These companies were based across continents, some in Europe, some in Asia, some homegrown across Africa, but always in collaboration with the Nigerian state or private concession holders. The minerals, often sold at bargain prices, drained from Nigeria's earth inexorably onward to power industries elsewhere. But now, a new resolve, a new era. The transformation began in silence. The government assembled teams of geologists, mining experts, trade strategists, and economic planners. They dug deeper, not just shafts into the earth, but into economic reports, trade agreements, and global demand forecasts. What they uncovered was staggering. Nigeria was sitting on potential world-class deposits of columbite and tantalite, the so-called industrial platinum, used in electronics, aerospace, and even nuclear reactors. Exploratory studies suggested lithium-bearing pegmatites across several states, perhaps enough to supply a significant portion of global demand for lithium-ion batteries. Iron ore reserves could provide feedstock for steel at a scale rivaling the largest producers. Gold, copper, tin, zinc, all woven in a tapestry of resources rarely seen in a single nation. And yet, Nigeria was not reaping the full benefits. Raw ore went out. Processing and refining, the real value add, happened elsewhere. The final products, often thousands of times more valuable, came back at high cost. The new leadership concluded, why be the supplier of raw ore when you can be the manufacturer of finished goods? Why not keep the juiciest slice of the value chain for Nigeria? So the plan emerged in whispered corridors and secret meetings, then rolled out publicly in a thunderclap. Nigeria declared, unless global trade partners, with no names quoted, but clearly including major economies, agreed to terms more favorable to Nigerian interests, exports of key minerals would be frozen. Processing licenses would require onshore refining, with strict local content rules. Export quotas would be introduced. Companies unwilling to comply would be denied access. The headline, Nigeria had drawn a line in the sand. And the target was clear, the United States. In Washington, boardrooms lit up. Analysts at defense contractors, battery manufacturers, and tech firms scrambled. On foreign policy desks, advisors whispered of consequences, fragile supply lines, dependencies, and leverage slipping from U.S. hands. Because for decades, the United States, directly or indirectly, had relied on African mineral exports for critical components. Rare earths, tantalum, niobium, lithium, key for advanced electronics, defense systems, microchips, jet engines, batteries, even medical devices. While some of those materials came from other continents, the margins were tight. Alternative sources existed, but none offered the combination of mineral variety that Nigeria's soil did. And now, with Nigeria flexing its newfound leverage, those supply lines were threatened. Across the world, global markets responded to the tension immediately. Futures prices for lithium and rare earth elements spiked. Stockpiles of tantalum and columbite in Europe and Asia, already thin, vanished within weeks as buyers scrambled to secure alternate supplies. Steelmakers, fearful of disruption in iron ore flow, began hoarding materials. Smelters in East Asia and Europe adjusted output schedules. Massive commodity funds started shifting capital into African mining firms, some aligned with Nigeria, betting that the scramble for Nigerian ore would pay off. The ripple effect spread fast. Technologies dependent on these minerals, green energy, electric vehicles, high-speed trains, wind turbines, risked delay or cost increases. Defense contracts faced uncertainty. Missile systems, navigation chips, radar equipment all use components dependent on rare metals. Consumer electronics manufacturers began to warn of possible shortages. The tension between cheap convenience and resource sovereignty had been injected into the veins of modern civilization. But Nigeria's message was not just about economics. It was geopolitical posturing. For decades, global superpowers had acted as though minerals from African soil were infinite, tapping them without regard. Nigeria's move was a bold recalibration. The government positioned itself not as a passive supplier, but as a strategic partner, one that could either power the next generation of devices and green tech, or withhold its treasure troves. It forced the world to think, what is the true value of minerals when they lie beneath sovereign land? Do you treat them as infinitely available commodities, or as national assets deserving value, control, and respect? For the United States, the implication was stark. If Nigeria stood firm, refusing to export or demanding joint ventures under Nigerian terms, American companies risked losing access or paying steep premiums. Any existing ban the United States tried to impose on Nigerian commodities in response could boomerang. The ban would not isolate Nigeria, but isolate America from vital resources. Nigeria's gamble hinged on unity. The government appealed to every major mining firm operating within its borders, from multinational metals conglomerates to regional industrial houses. They offered a stark choice: commit to developing local processing, invest in Nigerian infrastructure, and share profits with the nation, or be shut out entirely. It was a political chess move executed on a global stage. Some companies blinked first. A few announced tentative plans to build refineries in Nigeria, citing long-term partnerships. Others initiated environmental and social impact assessments, seeking local content approvals. Stock prices of firms perceived as cooperating with the new paradigm rose quickly, but a good number remained silent. For them, Nigeria's demands were too steep. Compliance would mean re-engineering entire supply chains, relocating major parts of their processing capacities. Many were not optimistic. They began quietly evacuating capital, preparing to cut losses. Meanwhile, inside Nigeria, the move sparked nationalism. Citizens who had long watched mineral wealth flow away as raw or cheered. Politicians touted a new dawn for national sovereignty. Media outlets ran headlines: Nigerian earth, Nigerian wealth. In industrial hubs, conversations turned to building refineries, training metallurgists, forging export-grade alloys. The idea took root. Nigeria would no longer be a quarry. It would be a foundry, a factory, a global supplier of refined materials. The world took notice. International headlines began to shift tone. Africa was no longer a passive supplier of raw materials. It was a rising power with leverage. A new era of resource diplomacy had begun. Yet, as with any high-stakes drama, there were risks. Global companies might shift operations to other countries with easier supply terms. Nations with untapped mineral reserves could be swept up as alternative sources. The value of Nigerian refining capacity could plummet if demand shifted elsewhere. Nigeria could also face diplomatic or economic retaliation. And from the perspective of the United States, the stakes were unsettling. Tech supply chains fractured, manufacturing costs surged, industries dependent on rare earths and specialized minerals found themselves scrambling. For a country used to dictate trade terms, leverage slipping away was unsettling. If Nigeria stayed resolute, withheld shipments, and enforced onshore processing, then American developers of green technology, defense contractors, battery manufacturers, all had reason to panic. The supply chain disruption could delay projects, derail innovation, and force a scramble for alternatives. Even allies of the United States found themselves affected. European battery companies, tech manufacturers in East Asia, all now had to diversify their sources, evaluate new mining jurisdictions, and potentially face ethical questions about human rights and environmental costs in countries with weaker regulatory frameworks. The so-called Green Revolution, once heralded as planet-saving, risked becoming tangled in supply chain politics. In the backdrop, economists sounded alarms. Commodity indexes soared. Inflationary pressure mounted as manufacturers passed increased costs to consumers. Governments worldwide, facing growing demand for minerals, scrambled to negotiate with Nigeria. China, Russia, India, the European Union, each opened diplomatic overtures, seeking long-term supply deals, refining partnerships, joint venture frameworks. Because if Nigeria had made itself the gatekeeper to those minerals, everyone needed a key. Nigeria held the key. But the boldest move came when Nigeria publicly addressed the international community, speaking not with anger, but with calculated calm. In a statement released to global media, the Nigerian government said, "We will not subsidize global supply chains for free. Our resources are sovereign. Their utilization will benefit the Nigerian people and economy. Those unwilling to uplift value chains within Nigerian soil will find access closed." The statement sent shockwaves across trading floors in London, Shanghai, New York. It reframed the mineral trade not as a commodity market, but as a matter of national dignity. For billions of people who rely on electronics, cars, medical devices, renewable energy, or even steel beams that build skyscrapers, the sudden possibility that materials could dry up was dramatic. Supply chain experts spoke of the Nigerian bluff, but also the Nigerian pivot. Could the world function without Nigeria's minerals? Over time, yes, but at higher cost, and perhaps not with the same speed. Back in Nigeria, construction crews broke ground near major ore fields. Contracts were signed. Mines once nearly abandoned for being low-grade began reopening under new management. Local economies sprang to life. Towns once ghostly after the mines were shuttered saw activity, new infrastructure, new jobs. Brick kilns fired up, new roads carved through red soil. Technician training programs began. The nation was mobilizing, not for war, but for commerce, not for conquest, but for economic sovereignty. For global mineral firms still hoping to survive, negotiations began in earnest. Boardrooms lit up late into the night. Some offered profit sharing, joint ventures, technology transfer, local employment quotas. Others tried to push back. Why must we invest in expensive on-site processing when cheaper overseas refineries exist? But the Nigerian response was uniform. Without compliance, no license. At stake was more than ore. It was access, influence, the ability to produce advanced electronics, weapons, clean energy systems, even infrastructure materials. Some foreign powers tried stepping in. Diplomatic envoys arrived. Trade missions bustled. Offers were made, long-term offtake contracts, loans for infrastructure, aid packages tied to resource access. But the Nigerian leadership held firm. Any deal must include local capacity building, environmental safeguards, fair royalties, and genuine profit sharing. It wasn't charity. It was sovereignty, a reframing of value, a refusal to allow foreign entities to reap the benefits of Nigerian soil, while Nigerian communities remained poor and underdeveloped. Critics warned of consequences. What about demand shocks? What about price volatility? What about environmental risks? What about social impact on mining towns? But the government responded with plans, environmental regulations, community development funds, training for miners, safeguards against corporate exploitation. The world had to adapt, not Nigeria. and adapt they did, quickly.